Hey, this is Chris from CB Productions, and I'm going to be going over camera tracking in DaVinci Resolve Fusion. I recently put out a VFX course, and if you'd like to check it out, I'll put the link in the description below. But the number one question from the students was how I tracked my camera footage, or how I tracked the camera to get the camera tracked into footage that I used in Blender. And the short answer is I didn't. Even though I did everything in DaVinci Resolve Fusion and Blender and a couple other programs, I didn't do any camera tracking because I shot everything on sticks. And the main reason was it wasn't to be lazy or anything. I mean, I could have easily put it on my Kessler equipment and programmed in motion and got multiple shots. But this specific music video that I used for the course on how to create a music video, these actresses were used multiple times. So I originally had to get all my angel footage with them first, and then after wardrobe change, I had to go back and get all their little angel helper footage. So programming everything so it was dead on for multiple shots would have been a nightmare. It's doable, but it would have made my already 16-hour day much longer. So I ended up shooting on sticks. So like I said, short answer, I didn't do any camera tracking, but I'm going to show you how to camera track in DaVinci Resolve Fusion and use that data in Blender to either import 3D into actual footage or input actual footage into 3D. So let's jump into this other timeline. And I've already got some footage kind of set up, something quick and easy. So we can show you this, and that's all it is, just a camera track. And we're going to add a friend to our little actress here in this shot. So we're going to jump into Fusion, and I'm going to show you exactly how I camera track and do all this stuff. So I'm going to use Mocha Pro and bring in a Mocha Pro node. And we're going to plug it in, and we're going to launch Mocha. So with Mocha open, you can see we've got our footage in there. And I want to track this footage, get the camera track in so I can use it in Blender. And there's a few things I don't want and I don't care about, because the main thing I want is this ground. And you can see this footage isn't perfectly still. It's not a perfect pan in shot. It's moving around. So I'm going to track this, but I don't care about up here. I don't care about our actress, even though she's really not moving. She is moving a little bit. So I'm going to get those out of this shot. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make a B-spline around all this info. And make sure that stays there. There we go. I'm going to rename this matte top. Shut my cog off so I'm not doing anything with this footage. And then I'm going to use this mask ML right here, and I'm just going to click on her face and click somewhere else just to grab more info, and I'll click here to grab that info. So this generally makes a quick mask on her. If I needed more detail, I would get more detail, but I really don't. I want to make a matte to keep her out of this camera solve. So once I have that, I'm going to go to my matte button, generate object matte, and I'm going to dilate this about 4 pixels just to make it a little bigger so we know it goes around her. And I'm going to hit render. So basically what we did is we created a couple mats. So I can turn these on so you can see she's now matted out, and we can exempt this from the camera track. Same with our mat up here. Even simple shots like this, we want to just add a little help to this camera solve. So I'm going to go back to the track and shut this off, and let's rename this Mat Girl naming convention. And I'm going to add a new B-spline, just kind of randomly around here, just to help this track out a little bit. And we'll straighten this out. And let's just move it right down here so we know where we're going. We're just going to kind of use that square. And I'm going to make sure I unmark the mats that I already have, and I'm going to track shear and perspective and everything else. And there we go. We've got our little ground tracked. So let's rename this track ground. And we're going to go to our camera solve. Now, once in here, I want to make sure I mark these layers correctly. So if my cog is on, that means it's going to help out our camera solve. So I'm going to leave the ground on because I want this track data to help out the camera solve. But on this, on the girl in the top, I want to mark this as holding out. So it's not using any data within those mats to figure out this camera solve. Now down here for the focal length, if you know it, you can put it in, but it's, even though you know it, it might be off a little bit. So it's best just to leave it as unknown. And down here, it's not a zoom lens. It's not on a tripod, and we don't have corners to ignore. So I'm going to leave everything as is, but I'll probably bump this minimum tracker. This means the minimum amount per frame that it's going to give you. I'm going to leave that at 16. And my maximum tracks, I'm going to bump up to 160. And once I have that, all I have to do is click solve. And Mocha Pro went through and kind of solved this camera for us. And even though it looks a little off, it's pretty on. So the first thing I like to do is color code and get all these dots the correct color so I know what I'm working with. But before I do that, I'm going to mark my ground. So I'm just going to click and drag everything that's on the ground, go over here on the bottom and hit align to ground. So that's my ground. Then I'm going to pick one point, and I'll go ahead and pick right in front of her foot. This is going to be my origin point once I click make origin. So when I bring this into a 3D program, that's going to be centered in the origin of my world. So now let's go through and select all these points that are on the ground. Some are a little iffy, so I'll let them out. And I'm going to change their colors to pink, so we know the difference. And I'm going to select all these up top. And I'm going to change them to a darker green, so they're kind of hidden a little bit. Now if we go up here, click and select perspective, now we can kind of see our camera solve. And that's all the points in our 3D world. So what I want to do is, first thing, I'm going to view from like the left side or right side or whatever. And all these points I really want level to the ground. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hide this little track, because we really don't care about that. That was just there to help out our camera solve. I'm going to select all these points I know that are on the ground. And I'm going to put 0 so they're all zeroed on the ground. I can also take this and hit align to ground. So now I know when I go back to my camera, everything's properly aligned to the ground. And once I do that, I can go up to my scene transform and I can rotate my scene around, and all I'm looking for is the center line to kind of be lined up correctly. Because that will just help me in the 3D environment. So there we go. We've got our camera track. Once we have our track data, we can go down here and hit export camera data, and we have tons of options. So you can export it as for After Effects, Olympic data, FBX, hit film, Synthize if you're bringing it over to Synthize to get even better track, or you can export USD data. And we're going to make it easy and simple, and we're just going to do FBX. And you have the option, if you're running it in Nuke, you can export it specifically for Nuke or just regular FBX. And we're going to hit save, track new. There we go. And once you have that, you can just hit save and close out of Mocha. And then we're going to jump into Blender. So here in Blender, we're just going to delete all of our standard stuff. And we're going to go to File, Import, FBX. And we're going to import that info. And you'll see it imports all those points as little meshes so we can kind of see what's going on. And our point of origin is right there in the middle. And if we grab a new window, hit 0 to look at our camera, you can see our camera is moving according to our track. So let's go ahead and make this 100. Now, before you do anything, you just want to make sure your scene's set up properly. So if you, make sure your render engine is correct. So we're going to go Cycles, GPU, and max samples. I'm going to drop this down to 1024. We don't need that many. And the most important part is, one, you want to make sure your frame rate is correct. And if we go back to our Fusion, we want to double check this size of our image. So 3840 by 2160, Ultra HD. We can go back to Blender and we can input our resolution, 3840 by 2160. So we make sure our resolution is correct. And then if we click down here, we can see our individual parts. We'll click on the camera. We're going to go to the camera and just make sure you either export this as a sequence or you can use MP4, but just make sure it's the correct length. And if we go in here, we can select our background, change our background image. We can go to our folder and open up our footage, and I just exported it as a quick sequence. Nothing special, because all we just need that background so we can see what's going on. So if we kind of zoom in, we can see we now have our footage going along with our stuff. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hide this little ground bit right here, so we're not seeing that. And I'm going to also hide our static stuff. Now we want to import something and put it in here. So all you really have to do is hit File. Whether you're importing FBX or appending, you can append a file. Now I already did this, so I don't want to turn this into a Blender folder. I mean, a Blender tutorial. So I'm just going to open that file real quick. And you can see I threw a scene in here that I made real fast, and it's just of somebody running up and stopping. Now the key thing to remember once you import that is you're going to want to bring in a plane, because initially this isn't going to be in the scene. So you want to bring in a plane so you have something to catch shadows. Once you bring in a plane, you can go down to the object properties and just mark shadow catcher right here. That way it's not going to show up, it's only going to cast shadows when you render it out. So we can hide that, it'll still render our stuff. So that is basically our scene. Now the only other thing you want to do is if you don't have actual HDRIs from the scene, you're going to want to add an HDRI so it's just not regular lighting. So if I click our render button on, you can kind of see I added the HDRI. And to do that, all you have to do is go to your world, and down here under your background, all you have to do is go down here and select environment texture. Once you do, it'll bring up this window so you can pick an HDRI. And I just used an HDRI from Polyhaven, and I picked one that just kind of matched the lighting of this. It's overcast, there's not much sun, there's no real huge shadows, it's pretty dull, and so that's the HDRI I picked. And once you have that done, you set up all your color and everything. Now, if this was actually production quality, I would make sure I went through and all the coloring was done in aces and everything was correct. But since this is just a tutorial, I'm just doing it real fast. And all you have to do for your color is go in your render tab, go all the way down for your color, and you can choose what color you want to use. And I'm just using the AGX right now because it's closest to aces. So when it brings it into Fusion, that's going to be pretty close to aces. I just don't feel like messing with color profiles and everything in Blender right now. And for your output, all I did is selected OpenEXR and export them out as RGBA. And the one thing that I would do different if this was, like I said, real production ready, I would export these shadows and the lighting that's on here and everything as separate, like a multi-layer EXR. That way I could individually mess with the colors and everything. But since we're just doing this real quick, I'm just doing a regular OpenEXR. So once you do that, all you have to do is go up, render your animation, and your animation will all render. Once all your animation is rendered, all you have to do is go back into DaVinci Resolve Fusion, and we can go to our folder, and you just drag the entire folder over with your renders, and we've got our render. There we go. So we can drop down a merge node, and we can actually get rid of this Mocha node now and merge this into our footage. All right, so now that we've got our footage in there, all we have to do is just do a couple correction things and we'll be good. So first thing I'm going to do, since this really doesn't fit in here too well, is I'm going to add a blur. So we're going to just knock this down to probably, she's pretty blurry. Knock that down to 0.6. 0.6 is good. So after our regular blur, I would normally add a motion blur, but motion blur. With this vector motion blur, you actually need vectors, and I didn't export any vectors with this, so there's no vector data. So this won't work very well, so we'll skip that. But again, in a production ready one, you would export all that fun stuff. And then the only other thing I'm really going to do before I throw color correct on it is I'm going to throw some grain. Let's add some film grain, or we'll just add regular grain, and just kind of look at what's going on with this footage. And it's really not that grainy, so we're just going to bring it way back, change our spacing up a little bit, and change our grain size. Burst softness. And then I'm going to throw a color correct on, and really not do much color correcting. And before I do that, actually, I'm going to take our footage after our blur and add a bitmap. So with our bitmap, we can get in here and you can see this is our footage, our bitmap coming through using our alpha. But I'm going to knock this down a little bit so it's just on the bottom of those shadows. And this is the bitmap I'm going to use for our color correct. And let's bring that up. And I'm really not going to do much. I'm going to up this tin a little teeny tiny bit. And I'm going to knock our saturation down a tiny bit. And add a tiny bit of gain. That's really it. Since we didn't go through and get our color using ACES and all that fun stuff, it's a little more difficult to match some of this stuff. But this is Rec 709, our original footage, and we export. This is basically coming in as Rec 709 right now. So there is our tracked camera throwing a 3D element in from Blender. And if we go back to our regular footage, and we can generate some optimized media real quick. And there we go. So, thanks for watching this tutorial. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next tutorial.